It's the last Tuesday of the month. Let's do a book wrap up. Hi everyone, I'm Tabitha, and at the end of the month on Tuesdays, I like to talk about the books that I read during the month and give a little bit of reviews where we talk about what I liked, what I didn't like, and who I recommend the book for. This month I've read a total of 9 books. So I've put helpful timestamps in the comments of the video, so if you're looking for the review of a particular book, you can find that by clicking on the timestamp. A couple disclaimers before we start. First, these reviews are obviously my opinion. If you've read one of these books, I would love to know your opinion. Just drop a comment down below telling me what you thought about the book. I love having book discussions. Second, I read a little bit of everything. So I make sure to tell you the genre, the age category, and the year the book was released. Also, towards the end of the review, I will tell you who I recommend the book for. Third, if you would like to recommend something you think I would like based on something you see here, just drop a comment giving me the title of the book and the author, and I'll get it added to my TBR, which is currently about 450 books strong. However, if you had a part in bringing that book you're about to recommend into the world as an author or a publisher, then make sure you fill out the form that's in the comments to help it jump up my TBR. Let's get to reviewing. Book 1 for the month of September, The Dead Zone by Stephen King. This is a 1979 publication by Viking Press, and it turns out, by the way, that I happen to have a first edition, which is really cool because I didn't know that. This is an adult mystery thriller, and it is 402 pages. Your synopsis: John Smith awakens from a coma to find he has the power to see the future. So what didn't I like about this book? There is too much in the story that felt like it's not directly necessary to the plot. So this actually is one of my oldest complaints with Stephen King, and a reason why I didn't read him for so many years. A couple of you have commented on the fact that you find it interesting that I read so much Stephen King, and honestly that's because I didn't for a really long time. And so now as an adult and as a more, how about mature reader, I'm pulling in a lot of Stephen King to try to connect to it again and see, I don't want to say what the fuss is all about, but that really works. But The Dead Zone kind of highlights one of my biggest complaints with Stephen King, and that is sometimes there is too much detail that I don't really need, that kind of drags down the story. The second thing that I wasn't crazy about in this one is the politics. I am hit or miss when it comes to politics. Sometimes I enjoy reading about them, and sometimes I really, really hate it. There's not too much middle ground for me. I can't always read about politics. I'd have to say the political rallies and the political buildup to this one, it just bored me and it lost me, and I didn't connect with the story as much because of those. Third thing I didn't like is, and I'm being brutally honest here, John is boring. I hate to say that because John's gifted with this incredible ability, and that should make him fascinating, and yet somehow he wasn't. He just wasn't. He seems like he's trying to be a good person, and I get that, but the internal stuff that he's going through, I don't know. I mean, it just didn't work for me. Something about him comes across as whiny, and for that reason, he wasn't my favorite. Let's just say that. Okay, so what did I like about this book? Because there were things that I liked. First of all, the entire opening to this book is marvelous. It's marvelous. The book is divided into 3 parts, and part 1, I mean, it just sold me. I loved everything about part 1. I had like no complaints about part 1 whatsoever. Second thing I liked about this book is that the morality questions that it raised later in the book are amazing. That is wonderful. I read books for good morality questions, and this one delivered all the way. So 2 thumbs up for the morality question and the exploration of that and the way that shook down. So who should read this book if you haven't already, even though this book has been out since 1979? If you like dramatic stories with supernatural twists, I think this is a good one for you. If you want to try something from Stephen King, but you've been afraid of the horror, or maybe you don't necessarily like when it's got the biblical good versus evil thing going on, I think this is the book for you to try. It's not straight up horror. It doesn't have the biblical good versus evil, but it is Stephen King, and I think that you might enjoy this. If you particularly do like politics and political intrigue in a story, I think you would enjoy this one. The overall rating for me, I went 3 stars for this one. I loved the main storyline. I loved the startup for this one, but I just didn't need or like a lot of the side plots. So 3 stars for The Dead Zone by Stephen King. Book number 2 for the month of September is The Hunt by Andrew Fukuda. It is a 2012 publication by St. Martin's Griffin. It is a young adult fantasy, 293 pages. Your synopsis. Vampires have taken over the world, and Gene knows keeping who he really is a secret is the only way to stay alive. What didn't I like? Buckle up. It's going to be a bit. What didn't I like? The first thing I didn't like about this one is that, if I'm being brutally honest, Gene is annoying and self-centered. I'm sorry. He is. And not in like a, oh, but it's believable and he's a good YA character. Nope. He was annoying and he was self-centered, and I found myself absolutely hating Gene, which is rough because he's the main character. Second thing I didn't like about this one, there's a big twist. A big twist. It wasn't a twist at all. I knew literally the entire time. And in fact, I found myself yelling out loud at Gene for not having it figured out. This was like the book equivalent to watching a horror movie and yelling at the heroine not to go up the stairs. You know, that cliche thing. Yeah, that's what I was doing. I was literally yelling at Gene. Not only was I yelling at him the answer, I was yelling at him the clues that he was missing as to the big twist. So it wasn't a twist. It was ruined for me. Third thing I didn't like. I am not a stickler for grammar. I'm not. And I'm not saying there were grammatical mistakes, but what I am a stickler for is figurative language that is used wrong or that is weak. Look, the phrase is, I couldn't care less. As in, I couldn't possibly care any less right now because I care so little. It irks me when authors say I could care less. It was used and it bothered me. Okay, the next thing I didn't like, I told you to buckle up. It was going to be a while. Okay, so there are some plot holes in this one. Big ones. And if they're answered in the second one, because this is the first book in a series, okay. But for right now, there were some really big plot holes. So I'm just going to hit a few of them. And I'm going to warn you that this may be a slight, I'm going to try not to spoil it, but this may be a slight spoiler if you haven't read The Hunt, because plot holes can be spoilers. I'm going to try not to. So the first big plot hole that I see is that, so I think the synopsis kind of gives away that Gene's not going to be a vampire, right? So that's not a spoiler. But Gene eats raw meat at school to try to keep up appearances, right? A human's going to get sick doing that. So I feel like you need to explain to us how he goes through all this time and never gets sick doing that. And I feel like the occasional fruit was not enough. Second big plot hole that I found is that it's not really a plot hole, I guess. It's just that it could be, depending on your answer. So the question that I keep having is, how did we get here? How did we go from the world we live now to this world of all vampires? There had to be like a branch, an in-between, a bridge. And the hints that are dropped lead me to believe that the answer to this might be a plot hole. And I could be wrong. That's possible. But for right now, that bothered me. Another big plot hole, and this is a big one. This is like you can drive a semi-truck through the plot hole. Gene has been raised to hide emotions his entire life, and he's been among people who don't have them, don't use them, don't register them. And yet, when he does see an emotion on someone's face, he instantly recognizes what that emotion is. Really? Gene has never been around emotions, and it's not just the basic ones he's connecting with and recognizing. He's recognizing embarrassment. He's recognizing frustration. Those are going to be really hard for someone who's never been allowed to show an emotion and who doesn't see them to recognize on the face of another person. So that was rough for me. And then the last problem I had with this story is more just, and I think this one, out of all the other ones I've said, I think this one was intentional probably, so I can probably forgive this one more than the rest of them, is that the idea here, of course, is that, like it says in the synopsis, humans are gone and vampires are running the world. So why are there so many humans? I mean, wouldn't they know? But I think that one was probably intentional. So what did I like? Because I just spent a lot of time telling you what I didn't, and that's mean. And I do have things I liked about this one, so I want to tell you what some of them were. I did like, I'm not a vampire myth person, so I did like that this one took some creative differences to the vampire myths. This took some liberties and went in different directions than the vampire myths you've heard, and I did like that. Some of them even work. Some of the offshoots and differences in the vampire myths actually even work. They really do. I like them. The last and final sentence or final words of the book, look, that's a cool way to end. It was a very cool way to end. So I'm glad that I almost didn't finish this book. I'm glad I did because the ending was one of the things I liked. It was a cool way to end. It may create a problem in book 2, but for right now, it's a cool way to end, and I like that. Who should read this one? This is really tough for me. I always like to tell you who should read it, but for me, this is tough because I'm not sure that I would recommend it. Yeah. However, if you are like here for vampire stories and you just love vampire stories and you would like an interesting twist on vampire stories, so you can't be like a diehard person who's like, don't mess with my myths. If you're here for vampire stories, you love them and you like when they do little interesting twists on them, you might actually feel differently about this book. You might like it. I should say, there are a lot of people who rave about this book on Goodreads, which I think is how I heard about it in the first place. So clearly, not everybody feels the same way I do about this book. So you might like it. I don't know. Read some of the 5-star reviews. You might like it. I say this about every book, but particularly this one. If you've read The Hunt by Andrew Fukuda and you have an opinion about it, whether it's the same as mine or different than mine, please drop a comment. I would love to know whether you agree with me or whether you think I'm absolutely insane. Because when I have a really strong opinion about some of these books, I would love to know what you think. My rating. I don't think this is going to shock you. I gave this book 1 star. This just wasn't enjoyable for me. I spent more time being annoyed at this book and yelling at the character than anything else. And so I just didn't get any enjoyment out of it. It just got irritation. So 1 star for me from this book. Book 3 for the month of September is The God Queen by ML Tishner. This is an ARC, an advanced reader copy that I got. This book is coming out next month, which is why I wanted to get the review up this month. This book is coming out in October 2019. ML Tishner is going to be independently publishing or self-publishing with Amazon. And it is 529 pages, and I would call it a new adult science fiction, although it does have some fantasy elements to it. So your synopsis. The return of the God Queen has long been talked about and is a legend for the people, and yet it will still go differently than anybody expected. What didn't I like about this book? I always like to start with what I didn't like so I can end you on a positive note. The first thing that irked me about this one came up early, and I'm going to admit that I got over it. So we have a book here that's set in space, and it seems to be an epic science fiction type book, and the main character's name is Ray. That forced me to draw instant parallels to the big giant space franchise, whose name I'm not going to say. And that bothered me for a little while until I got over it. Second thing I didn't really like was that the world building was just a little lacking from what I would have liked, especially in the beginning. You're dropped into space full of planets you've never heard of and whose names can be hard to remember. And it's a little off-putting to try to remember where you are and what's going on and the landscape of things. And to be honest, the reason why this only bugged me a little is because, like you do with all science fictions, I think, who do that, you just ignore it at some point and you figure if the name of the planet was important enough, you'd remember it, right? Or you'll look it up. So I think that bugged me just a little, but it wasn't a really big thing. I got over it. The last thing I wasn't crazy about, and this one had a point, I think, and so I think it was explained in a way. The romance moved just a little too fast for me. Not crazy always about like insta-love in a book, although it can work if it's done right. This one moved a little too fast for me, but I know that it had a point, and I'm sure it's going to be played with more later, and so I'm sure that there's a reason for it, so I can kind of forgive that one. So what did I like or love? Can I say love? What did I love about this book? Because there were a lot of things to love in this one. A lot of reasons to add it to your TBR so that when it comes out in October, you don't miss the release. The first one, I mean, this cover, hello. This is a gorgeous cover. Second thing that I loved about this one, so there's a character named Bronx in here, and Bronx has this inner struggle going on that is so incredibly well written. Bronx is an amazing character. He's very well written, and he felt real. I mean, he just popped right out of this book. He was great. I would read, and probably will read, another book in this series for Bronx. I mean, he's that amazing. I want to know what's going on more with his inner struggle and his dilemmas. He's just realistic. He's relatable. And I really love him. So that was great. The next thing I liked about this one is the entire concept of the book is fascinating. So the whole premise around reincarnated gods is fun, and it's been done before. You've seen it, of course, in Egyptian mythology and in lots of mythology, brings back reincarnated gods, and that's fun. And I really like that idea. But the idea of you getting to be in a book where the main character is one of those reincarnated gods who's struggling through this and who's trying to learn this and what this means, there's a lot of potential in that. And it was really, really, really cool. And it actually leads me into the next thing I loved about this book, which is that this book sets up what I assume will be a series really, really, really well. So it gives you some answers right now, and it gives you some information that you're going to like enough to make the book pleasurable, and yet still leaves you with lingering questions that are going to make you want to read a book 2 or a book 3 or however many ML Tishner decides to do for this series. So who should read this one? Well, if the idea of an epic space fantasy or epic space science fiction appeals to you, read this because it's really good. If you are a fan of a story of a reluctant hero, I'm going to recommend this one. If you like stories about people coming into and learning to use their powers, I'm going to recommend this one. And if the idea of reincarnated gods appeals to you. Overall, my rating, I went 4 stars for this one. I really like character-driven books, and I like unique situations, and I felt like this one delivered on all of those fronts. So I'm going 4 stars for The God Queen by ML Tishner. You should really add this to your TBR before it comes out in October. That's my recommendation. All right, my 4th book for the month of September is This Never Happened by R. Tim Morris. This is a 2019 publication from Empire Stamp, which I believe is an independent press. It is an adult science fiction novel, 354 pages. Your synopsis. Epic Smog cannot shake the feeling that he doesn't belong here in this world or in this time. He belongs in his dreams, where everything feels vivid and real. What I didn't like. This book is written in second person, which takes a few pages to get used to. So the first couple pages was a little jarring and kind of unusual. I mean, how often do we read fiction in second person? But that doesn't last. You get comfortable with it really fast. The only other thing I didn't particularly like is Epic is a really confused main character, which makes him confusing. Does that make sense? So he's supposed to be. He is a confused person in general, but he definitely comes across as confusing a few times. It was intentional, so I can forgive it. So what did I like? No, what did I love about this book? I'm going to be honest with you. That first couple pages with a confusing main character in second person, I didn't think I was going to love this book. But I did. I did. I loved it big time. So what did I love about this book? The second person writing works. It works. After those few pages, you get to the point where you realize it serves a purpose and it's done well. And it really works. I feel like this will now be what I turn to when people say, but can you use second person in fiction, really? I'm going to be like, yes, you can. Read this book. So if you're interested in how second person can work for fiction, I think you need to pick this one up because that worked for this book. Second thing I loved about this book is that the ending was amazing. I'm just going to, no spoilers, it was amazing. I did not see it coming. I completely loved it. I was floored by the ending. It's one of those that you think about it for a few days afterwards. It just kind of sticks with you. It was a wonderful ending. Nice job. Third thing I loved about this one. There were parallels drawn between a book that Epic is reading and then, of course, his life. And it was really cool. I really like that. I really love when that happens. When there's a character in the story themselves, they are a reader and they're reading something and drawing parallels to their life. I just love it because as readers, that's what we do, right? So that was cool to have that in this book. Well done. This book would be really cool to unravel with a book group. It's one of those books that has layers and twists, and I feel like literary experts would just have a blast unraveling this one and discussing it and talking about it. And so I loved that. And that kind of leads me right into who should read this one. If you're a reader who enjoys literary descriptive stories, or if you want a little mystery, or if you want a little intrigue, or if you like unraveling layers to a story, you're going to love this one, and I definitely recommend it. My rating, this is the first time in a while that I've been able to say this, but my rating for this one, I went 5 stars all the way. I completely loved this one. I loved this book. I loved the ending, and to be honest with you, I think I'm probably going to reread it sometime in the future, maybe even in the near future, because I do love unraveling stories, and I think I'll get to unravel even more layers. So 5 stars for This Never Happened by R. Tim Morris. 5th book for the month of September is Glass Sword by Victoria Aveyard. It is a 2016 release by Harper Teen. It's a young adult fantasy just like the first book in the series, The Red Queen, and it is 444 pages. Just so you know, I previously rated the first book in the series, The Red Queen, 3 stars, and now we're reviewing book number 2. In this sequel to Red Queen, the struggle for freedom in the blood-segregated world grows, and Maribero must face the darkness growing inside of her. So let's start with what I didn't like. First of all, what I didn't like was the pace. This book is way too slow compared to the first book. There's not enough action, and it seems like this was almost a throwaway between the action of the first one and what I can assume will be an epic battle coming in the third. Second thing I didn't like is this book felt like it was missing a villain throughout the entire book. Technically, he's not missing. It's just that all we do is talk about him in this book. I was hoping at the end of the first, because we finally found out who the villain was, that we'd have more of the villain in book 2, but really, it's just not there. I wanted more FaceTime. I want seeing more of the two sides, and it just wasn't there. It didn't deliver on that. Third thing I didn't like about this one is Maribero, our main character. I am not a fan. She is so flaky. She's flaky. And at one point, towards the end of the book, Cal kind of snaps at her and calls her out for all of her garbage. And I have to be honest with you, I was cheering. Everything he says is completely true. He calls her out on everything I was thinking all the way through, and that was probably my favorite part of the book. Fourth and final thing I can say I didn't like about this one is overall, all the way through the book, you are saying to yourself, I feel like I've heard this one before. We have a dystopian heroine who can save the world from terrible leaders, even though she doesn't really want to, and she never would have picked it. And she's caught in a love triangle between the boy who she grew up with, who reminds her of home, and the boy who saved her life when she faced danger. And you just feel like you've heard this story before. And I was hoping that this book would take it in another direction, and it really kind of didn't. So what did I like about this one? The first thing I liked about this one is Maven. Seriously, can we get more Maven? Second thing I liked about this one is I still stand behind the concept of this series. The concept of a population that is segregated based on something that no one can control. It's highlighted here in a way that encourages great discussions. The series itself has wonderful potential for hosting those conversations about segregation. Third thing I liked about this book is Cal. He wasn't my favorite in the first book, but I like the arc that Cal had in this one. He's more of the struggling character in this one who's kind of learning and growing into himself. He has the most believable arc in this entire book, and I love that. I love him in this book. Who do I think should read this one? If you think dystopian books should spend more time on the build-up and less time being like, boom, war, then you'll like this one, because this is definitely the build-up. If you love the characters in Red Queen and you just need more of them, you're going to like that because you get more of them in this book. My rating overall on this one is 2 stars. I just feel like this book didn't add enough to the plot to be worth the time. That being said, I may go for book 3 because, like I said, I feel this one may have been a failed bridge between the concept of book 1 and what I think is coming in book 3. So I may read book 3 to see if it holds up to those ideals or not, but I was overall real disappointed in book 2. 2 stars for Glass Sword by Victoria Aveyard. My 6th book for the month of September is Where They Found Her by Kimberly McCreight. This is an adult age category mystery thriller. It is published by Harper in 2015, and it is 326 pages. Your synopsis. The body of an infant is discovered in the woods in New Jersey. No one knows who the baby is or how she ended up there, but a lot of secrets are about to unravel in the course of the investigation. So what didn't I like about this one? Well, first of all, there are whole chapters that didn't really add anything to the story, that you feel like you could skip and you wouldn't really miss anything. Secondly, the characters in this one aren't my favorite. They're not characters I hate necessarily, but they felt a little predictable. The third thing I didn't like about this one was the ending. I didn't find the final twist interesting. I felt like it completely changed something vital about one of the characters just for the sake of putting a twist on it, and in my opinion, that kind of ruined the story. So what did I like about this one? Well, first of all, most of this mystery is pretty awesome. I found myself genuinely interested in who this baby was and where this baby came from and how the baby ended up there, who the parents were. Technically, I suppose I can say I figured it out, but I can only say that because I guessed a lot of people and one of those just turned out to be right, which is fun in a mystery, and that's the kind of thing that I really like. Something that keeps me guessing and that I don't have completely figured out all the way through. The other thing I liked about this one, it has kind of an interesting format. It pops between 3 different point of views, and it also inserts some newspaper articles or transcripts from a therapy session or things like that. And for me, in my opinion, this worked. I think it helped me remember that this book was taking place in kind of a small town and that people would all be taking a part in this story or watching this story. It helped remind me of that all the way through. So who do I think should read this one? If you like mysteries that keep you guessing and are loaded with twists and turns, you can't go wrong with this one. This was a good book for that. It is a mystery. The mystery does deliver, and I think you'll like that if you're a big mystery fan. Overall, my rating is 3 stars. I do like mystery. I am a big mystery fan, and it's what I read this for. It might have had some slightly predictable characters, and it had an ending that didn't really work for me, but overall, the mystery worked for me, and that's what I read this for. So I went 3 stars for Where They Found Her by Kimberly McCreight. Book 7 for the month of September is The Memory Thief by Lauren Mansy. This one is coming in October of 2019, so next month. It's coming to you from Blink, I believe. It is a YA fantasy, 368 pages long, and I received this advanced reader copy from NetGalley. So thank you to NetGalley and to Blink for my copy in exchange for this honest review. In the city of Craywick, memories are currency, and all the people are under the rule of Madam. So what didn't I like about this story? The pacing was a little off. It felt like it all passed kind of fast to me. I wanted a little more time to slow down and savor the characters, and I didn't feel like I got that. In fact, the second thing I didn't like about it is probably because of the pacing. The characters fell a little flat to me. I wanted to connect with them. I wanted more emotion, and I just didn't feel it. Third thing I wasn't crazy about is that some of the twists in the story didn't really work for me. Surprising me with who a character really is doesn't work if I don't really care about the character and I don't fully understand the twist and I wasn't invested in them to begin with. So some of the twists fell a little flat for that reason. But there were things about this book I did like. So what did I like about this story? This premise is awesome. So the whole idea around a world where memories can be traded, bought, or sold is incredibly intriguing. And I enjoyed watching this play out and imagining how that would be in real life. The maze was pretty cool. So there's a build up to a maze and then the maze was there. It is a little anticlimactic, but in general, the maze was really cool. The whole concept of the maze and the idea behind the maze was really interesting, and I kind of liked that. And this cover is gorgeous. I love this cover completely. So who do I think should read this one? If you're someone who reads young adult and you like action, and maybe you think sometimes young adult overdoes the character backstories. Maybe you feel like sometimes there's too much behind each of the characters, and you're just thinking, I want to move on and get to the story. You're going to love this one. If you think young adult in general sometimes has too much drama, you might enjoy this story. Got to the action very fast. The action worked. This is the book for you. My overall rating for this one is 2 stars. I wanted to slow down and get a little more backstory. I read for character, so I wanted a little more character in this one. So overall, I went 2 stars for The Memory Thief. Book number 8 for the month of September is The Rebel Girls by Elizabeth Keenan. This just came out this month, September of 2019 by Aveyard Press. It is a young adult contemporary story. It is 384 pages long, and I received this copy from NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley for my copy in exchange for an honest review. Your synopsis. When a malicious rumor starts spreading through the halls of Athena's Catholic high school in 1992, girls from both sides of the abortion debate will have to work together in order to clear someone's name. So what didn't I like about this one? The first thing I can say I didn't like is this book had kind of a slow start. It seemed to me like it spent a little too much time dialing in who our main character was and what was important to her, who her friends were, what her passions were. It's important, and I love that, but I would love to see that mixed with the action a little bit so that I get more action in that backstory, if that makes sense. Second thing I wasn't crazy about, and this is probably because of my teaching background, and I'm probably more sensitive to this than most people, but there is a teacher in this story who I absolutely hate. I hate her because she does hurtful, terrible things that would be incredibly bad teaching and seems to have no real purpose behind these hurtful, bad moments. Like I said, I'm probably more sensitive to that and more passionate about that because of my background in education. It bothered me. That irked me. I wanted to see more of a reason behind her actions maybe, or I understand that this is told from the point of view of a teenager who would just think that they're being attacked and the teacher's being mean, but I was hoping that as adults we maybe would get hints of her motive in the background, and I didn't feel like there was enough of that. The last thing I can say I didn't particularly like about this one is there is a side romance in this young adult, and I just felt like the side romance on this particular one didn't add anything to the main storyline and actually seemed to pull the focus away from it. So I wasn't crazy about the side storyline in this one, and not because I didn't think the two had chemistry, more just because I felt like it didn't add anything to the story, which is unfortunate because normally I like side romance. So what did I like about this one? Overall, the sisterhood aspect of the story is great, and I would read it for that. I would recommend it for that. So the whole sisterhood, bonding with the other girls, coming together, for a cause. That was wonderful, and I really liked it. Watching this group of girls band together to try to help figure out how to repair someone's damaged reputation was wonderful, and it was healing in a sense, and I really liked that about the story. I would recommend it for that alone. The other thing I liked about it is there's a big theme in here about standing up for what you believe in and forgiving people. And I'm not sure that I've seen that theme delivered or handled so well in a book in a really long time. And I could see this being an incredibly wonderful book to use with a group of teenage girls as a book study, as a conversation starter in a club. So if you're out there, you're watching and you're a teacher who maybe has a book club and you happen to notice there's a lot of girls in the book club, or maybe you want to split it or something, I just feel like a lot of girls would get a strong message in here about standing up for what you believe in, being strong girls, and forgiveness, and it would open up some wonderful conversations. In fact, that leads me right into who should read this. If you're into girl power stories or stories about girls standing up for themselves, or even anti-bullying campaign style stories, I think you're really going to love this one. So I would definitely say you do have to be a young adult reader, because this one reads like a young adult. The characters make decisions like teenagers. If that bothers you, don't read it. But if you're looking for a book about anti-bullying campaigns or girls standing up for themselves, I think you're really going to enjoy this one. Overall, my rating, I went 3 stars for this. The beginning dragged a little, and there's that side storyline that I could live without, but the themes of this book really saved it for me and really brought this around to the point where I'm going to say it's a good book and you should read it. So 3 stars for Rebel Girls. All right, friends, book number 9 for the month of September is this one, Alice, I Have Been by Melanie Benjamin. This is a 2009 release from Random House. It is adult age category and genre, I'd say historical fiction. 345 pages. Your synopsis. Alice Little is the woman on whom Alice in Wonderland is based. Now grown, she must look to her past to face the story that has made her infamous. So what didn't I like about this one? The creep factor of this one is way up from what I was expecting, making most of the story incredibly uncomfortable to read. So if you don't know anything about the backstory between the real Alice Little and the man whose pen name was Lewis Carroll, you may want to do a little research before you start on deciding whether or not this is a topic you think you can handle. And don't think Melanie Benjamin is going to tread lightly on the accusations of pedophilia, because she definitely doesn't tread lightly on this subject, and it makes it a little uncomfortable. Second thing I didn't like about this one is that the middle of the story fell a little flat for me. I wanted more of that angsty Alice, and I kind of wanted that to make a comeback, and I felt like it kind of fell flat for me. I didn't quite get what I wanted. Third thing I wasn't crazy about is the overall writing of the mother character just really irritated me. I cannot possibly be the only reader who thinks this woman was a terrible, terrible person. The final thing I can say about this one that I didn't like is, honestly, Alice in Wonderland is a story I've always enjoyed because it's an escapism. It's literally about a character who's escaping, and it's just always been a story I very much enjoy. So the twist to making this almost feel like it was a way to trap a child made me incredibly uncomfortable. And so I kind of feel like it may have ruined Alice in Wonderland for me, which is unfortunate. But what did I like? Because there were some elements of the story that I actually liked. The first one is that the middle end of the book, it reads like a historical fiction that almost kind of reminded me of Downton. Got some good historical elements and period pieces in place that are fun to read. The other thing that I can say that I liked about it was that there obviously was some research or some history that went into this book. And I always appreciate when an author does that. The last thing that I kind of liked about this one is the audiobook is narrated by someone who absolutely perfectly matches the voice that I think the book was going for, that the author was going for. So if you're going to go with this one, I'd say do an audiobook. So who should read this one? Well, if you're really into historical fiction and you aren't necessarily a huge Alice in Wonderland fan, who maybe the book might ruin that story for, but if you're a huge historical fiction fan, I think you would like this one. She brings a lot of historical elements from the Victorian era into the story that are really, really well done and are very period appropriate. So that's definitely somebody I would recommend this book for. Overall, my rating, I went 2 stars on this one. The cringe factor just didn't really go away, and I feel like it basically kind of ruined the story for me, unfortunately. So 2 stars for Alice I Have Been. Okay, that is it for me and my 9 books that I read in the month of September. Remember that if you had a part in bringing a book into the world that you want me to review on this channel, follow the link in the comments down below to send me that so we can get it on my TBR. Keep plotting the path to your dreams, and I will see you next time. Bye!